Officer Daniel Reese and Carla Hughes thought it was just another quiet night in Brookdale, until the man they tried to pull over turned his car into a weapon and their routine traffic stop exploded into chaos. The evening air hung still over Brookdale, the kind of quiet that only small towns knew. Streetlights buzzed softly, flickering to life one by one as the last of the daylight slipped away. Officer Daniel Reese sat behind the wheel of his patrol car, the hum of the engine almost blending with the gentle rhythm of crickets outside. His partner, Officer Carla Hughes, was scrolling through a tablet, finishing up a report from an earlier call about a noise complaint that turned out to be nothing. Their shift had been long but uneventful, and both were counting down the minutes until they could head back to the station and clock out. Then something caught Reese's attention. A dark gray sedan passed them on County Road 19, its tires edging over the center line before jerking back. It wasn't enough to cause alarm, but enough to make him frown. Distracted driving, maybe. He kept watching as the car continued down the road, its movement uneven, like the driver was either tired or nervous. Reese flipped on the dash cam and told Hughes he was going to check it out. She nodded, already typing the license plate number into the system. The results came back almost instantly. The car was registered to a man named Evan Marsh, a local mechanic who owned a small repair shop on the east side of town. No criminal record, no outstanding tickets, no red flags of any kind. Just an ordinary name tied to an ordinary life. Reese almost shrugged it off. They could give a quick warning about drifting lanes and be done for the night. It should have been simple. When Reese switched on the patrol lights, the flashing red and blue painted the empty road in color. For a few seconds, the gray sedan kept driving. That wasn't unusual. Some drivers took a moment to notice or find a safe place to pull over, but then the car picked up speed. Reese leaned forward, his voice low but sharp as he said the words that changed the tone of their night completely. The driver was not stopping. At first, it didn't make sense. The car wasn't stolen, the driver had no warrants, and there was no reason to run. Yet the taillights in front of them grew smaller as the distance widened. Reese hit the siren, the high-pitched wail echoing across the open fields, but the gray sedan only sped faster. Carla looked out the windshield, her expression tightening. The chase was on. Reese radioed dispatch, reporting a failure to yield and requesting backup. His heart began to pound in rhythm with the flashing lights. The sound of the siren filled the car, drowning out everything else. Ahead, the road curved toward the town limits, where quiet neighborhoods and dark intersections waited. What neither officer could have known was that the man behind the wheel wasn't Evan Marsh at all. The real story was sitting just beneath the surface, waiting to explode. What started as a simple traffic stop was about to unravel into something far darker than either of them could imagine. The gray sedan tore through the streets of Brookdale like a ghost in the night, weaving between the faint glow of streetlights. Officer Reese gripped the steering wheel tightly, keeping his patrol car just far enough behind to maintain a clear line of sight, but close enough not to elude him. The air inside the cruiser was heavy with tension. The sound of the siren bounced off nearby buildings, scattering through the quiet town like a warning bell. Reese's radio crackled with updates from dispatch. Backup units were on their way, but they were miles out. For now, it was just him and Officer Hughes. The sedan swerved sharply, its tires screeching as it cut through a four-way intersection. A red light flashed above, but the driver didn't hesitate. A truck driver blared his horn as the sedan sped past, missing a collision by inches. Reese felt a chill run through him. This wasn't panic anymore, this was deliberate. The streets began to narrow as they entered the older part of town, where the roads twisted between small houses and empty lots. Porch lights flicked on as residents heard the commotion, stepping to their windows to see what was happening. The chase had turned into a spectacle, the sound of engines and sirens breaking the stillness that usually defined Brookdale nights. Reese's focus never left the car. Every turn the driver made felt calculated, as if he knew exactly where he was going. He wasn't driving aimlessly. He was leading them somewhere. Carla glanced at the GPS and noticed the route. They were heading toward the industrial edge of town, a stretch lined with warehouses and empty dirt lots. Few people went there after dark. The sedan hit a bump and fishtailed for a moment before regaining control. Sparks flew from underneath as it scraped against the uneven pavement. The chase had gone on for nearly 10 minutes, though it felt much longer. Reese's adrenaline was high, but his thoughts stayed sharp. He knew that if the suspect didn't stop soon, someone could get hurt. Then, suddenly, the taillights ahead grew larger. The sedan was slowing down. Reese eased his foot off the accelerator, ready for the possibility of surrender. But instead of pulling over, the car veered right and turned onto a narrow, dead-end street. The only light came from a single flickering lamppost. At the far end stood a chain-link fence covered in vines, marking the boundary of an abandoned lumber yard. Reese positioned the patrol car a few yards behind the suspect, blocking the exit. The sedan's brake lights glowed red, but the driver didn't step out. The only sound was the idling of both engines, rumbling low in the night air. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Reese and Hughes exchanged a glance, each silently waiting for the other to move. Then, without warning, the gray sedan jolted backward. The engine roared to life again, the tires screamed against the pavement, and the vehicle came hurtling toward them. The routine traffic stop that had turned into a chase was about to become something far more dangerous. The sound of screeching tires ripped through the air as the gray sedan slammed into the front of the patrol car. The impact was jarring, throwing Officer Reese forward against his seatbelt. Metal crumpled and glass shattered, echoing through the empty street. The sudden violence of it stunned both officers, the calm professionalism of the chase replaced by raw instinct. Reese's first thought was that this couldn't be happening. No one in their right mind would use a car as a weapon against police. But the reality was right in front of him, lit by the pulsing red and blue glow of their emergency lights. Smoke rose from the front of the patrol car as its hood bent upward, steam hissing from the radiator. Inside the gray sedan, the driver's silhouette moved frantically. The engine revved again, louder, more desperate. Reese barely had time to react before the sedan lunged forward, jerking away from the collision. It spun toward the fence at the end of the road, the tires kicking up gravel and dirt. Sparks flared when the bumper scraped the metal barrier. The driver wasn't giving up. Reese pushed open his door and stepped out, his boots crunching on broken glass. The air smelled of burning rubber and gasoline. He shouted for the driver to stop, his voice cutting through the chaos, but there was no response. The sedan shifted into reverse again, its tires squealing as it rocketed backward. The car slammed into the patrol cruiser a second time, harder than before. The force shoved the police vehicle several feet back, knocking Reese off balance. Hughes braced herself, gripping the dashboard as the impact sent another wave of noise through the night. For a moment, everything blurred. The smoke, the lights, the sound of engines grinding against each other. Reese could hear the dispatcher's voice crackling faintly through the radio, asking for a status update, but he couldn't answer. His focus was locked on the sedan. The driver's window had shattered, and through the spiderweb cracks of the glass, he could see the man's face only for an instant. It was pale, tense, and completely unreadable. The sedan's tires spun wildly, digging into the pavement as it tried to move again. But the engine was dying, choking on its own smoke. The car jerked forward, then back, then forward again, as though the driver refused to accept that it was over. Reese could feel his pulse in his ears. He moved slowly, staying behind his door for cover, every muscle tense and waiting. Finally, the sound of the engine sputtered and faded. The gray sedan rolled a few inches, then stopped completely, its front end pressed against the fence. For the first time since the lights flashed on County Road 19, the night went still. The silence that followed was almost heavier than the noise that came before it. Reese's breathing slowed, but his eyes never left the car. He didn't know it yet, but what they were about to find inside that vehicle would change everything they thought they knew about this man. When the backup units finally arrived, the street was filled with flashing lights and the sound of idling engines. Officers fanned out quickly, securing the area while paramedics rushed toward the gray sedan. The front of the car was crumpled against the fence, the windshield shattered, and smoke still rose from under the hood. Inside, the driver was motionless, his head slumped against the steering wheel. It was hard to tell if he was unconscious or pretending, but the crash had clearly taken a toll. Paramedics moved fast, prying open the driver's door and checking his pulse. He was alive but barely responsive, blood ran down the side of his face, and his breathing was shallow. As they pulled him from the car, something slipped from his jacket pocket, a folded envelope stuffed with cash. Hughes noticed immediately and handed it to one of the investigators. It was the first sign that this wasn't just a panicked driver. The car was searched carefully while the medics loaded the suspect into an ambulance. Under the passenger seat, officers found unregistered handguns wrapped in a rag. In the back seat sat a black duffel bag filled with stacks of money, most of it in small bills. There were also fake IDs, credit cards under different names, and a disposable phone with its battery removed. Every discovery added another layer to the mystery of who this man really was. At the hospital, the man was listed under the name on the vehicle registration, Evan Marsh, but detectives were already doubting that identity. The fingerprints taken from the scene were sent to the state database, and within hours, a hit came back. The man in custody wasn't Evan Marsh at all. He was Lucas Brandt, a fugitive wanted for armed robberies across 3 states. He had vanished nearly 2 years earlier after a failed heist left one of his accomplices injured and another dead. Since then, authorities had been chasing leads that went nowhere. Now, by pure chance, a minor traffic violation had led them to him. Investigators pieced together his story. After disappearing, Lucas had stolen the identity of a real man named Evan Marsh who had died in a car accident in another state. Using that name, he had built a new life in Brookdale, working quietly as a mechanic and keeping out of sight. He paid in cash, avoided credit cards, and stayed off social media. To his neighbors, he was polite and private, the kind of person no one ever suspected of anything. What no one knew was that Lucas had been slowly gathering money again, likely planning another escape. The duffel bag of cash found in the car matched bills linked to a recent robbery in a nearby city. It seemed he was preparing to disappear once more, but fate had other plans. A single moment of reckless driving had undone years of hiding. As the detectives examined the wreckage later that night, the atmosphere around the scene felt strangely heavy. The flashing lights reflected off the twisted metal, and the smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air. What started as a traffic stop had revealed a fugitive's double life, hidden in plain sight. The news spread through Brookdale before dawn, moving from one phone screen to another until the entire town seemed to be talking about it. The quiet mechanic everyone trusted had turned out to be a wanted criminal. The small repair shop where he worked was surrounded by yellow tape the next morning, and reporters lined the sidewalks trying to get a glimpse inside. Neighbors stood on their porches, watching in disbelief as detectives carried out boxes of evidence. To them, Evan Marsh had been a reliable man who kept to himself, always polite, always busy. Now they were learning that he had been living a lie from the moment he arrived in town. At the hospital, Lucas Brandt regained consciousness under police guard. His injuries were serious but not life-threatening. When investigators questioned him, he said little, offering only fragments that didn't add up. There was no apology, no explanation for why he had run. But the evidence spoke for him: the cash, the weapons, the false documents, and the stolen identity. His fingerprints tied him to robberies across multiple states, including one that had left a store clerk injured. Every piece of information built a clearer picture of the man who had been hiding in plain sight. Officer Reese spent the next few days replaying the events over and over in his mind. The image of the sedan ramming toward them haunted his sleep. He kept asking himself what made Lucas so desperate that he'd rather risk death than pull over. Hughes felt the same unease. They both knew that, in their line of work, unpredictability was part of the job, but this incident had shaken them. It wasn't the first time a stop had gone wrong, but something about the deception, the years of pretending, made it linger longer in their thoughts. When the body cam footage was released to the public, it stunned viewers. The video began like any other stop, flashing lights, a car slowing down, but within seconds it turned chaotic. People across the state watched as the driver used his vehicle to attack the officers, the scene unfolding with shocking speed. The footage was shown on local news stations, used in training sessions, and discussed in classrooms studying criminal behavior. Everyone wanted to understand what could push a man to act that way. In court months later, Lucas Brandt was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His past crimes caught up with him, and the attempted assault on officers added even more time to his sentence. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read, staring straight ahead as though he had already accepted his fate long before the night of the crash. For Brookdale, life eventually went back to normal, but the story left its mark. People drove a little slower down County Road 19. Officers Reese and Hughes returned to work, but they carried a new sense of caution with them. The night had reminded everyone that danger could hide behind the most ordinary faces, and that even the calmest town could become the scene of something unforgettable in a matter of seconds.